The night has a way of hiding things that should never be seen. Eyes watch from shadows where light refuses to linger. Smiles stretch too wide, too knowing, and the air itself seems to thicken with something ancient, patient, and hungry. You may be alone, but nothing that waits in the corners, behind the curtains, or just beyond the veil truly leaves. Tonight, fear is not in what you see. It is in what watches, waits, and grins when you dare to look away. Before we dive into the scariest part of the story, I want to know, where are you listening from right now? Don't forget to comment if your heart is racing. If you're new here, subscribe or follow now to join this journey of fear. The fog rolled over the small street like a shroud, thick and suffocating, hiding the faint outlines of the 10 identical two-story houses in Sarah's neighborhood. She had been 16 then, an age of fragile curiosity, living in the lower floor with her parents while her 2 older brothers guarded the upper stories like silent sentinels. That morning, the air was unnaturally still. Sarah was brushing her teeth when her older brother, Ali, slipped into her room, eyes glinting with mischief, or perhaps something darker. "Want to see a ghost? Come here," he said, his voice a low whisper, almost swallowed by the eerie morning haze. Confused, Sarah followed him to her parents' room, where the window framed a figure standing in the middle of the empty road. Wrapped in a shawl that obscured everything but his piercing eyes, he faced the dense thicket at the edge of the road, an almost ritualistic posture. The winter chill didn't disturb him, and the fog seemed to cling to him like an invisible djinn. Sarah's mother trembled, whispering prayers she didn't usually say out loud. Yet, Sarah's mind, anchored in teenage logic, whispered that perhaps he was simply waiting for someone. They watched in silence for 10 minutes. The man didn't shift, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Or perhaps he did, but in a rhythm not of this world. There was something hypnotic, unnatural in the way his grin stretched, a crescent of darkness carved into the morning light. Even as they turned to prepare for their day, Sarah couldn't rid herself of the sense that the air itself was watching, and so was he. The boundary between reality and unseen forces thinned. Sarah felt it in the chill that crept down her spine, the tingle at the nape of her neck. Outside, the fog was no longer mist. It was a veil concealing an ancient watcher, a being whose patience had no measure in human hours. Later, as Sarah's older brother Assad guided her to college on his scooter, the fog seemed to follow them, curling around street lamps and telephone poles like the fingers of a restless djinn. She couldn't shake the image of the man. He was still there, standing in the middle of the road, his gaze fixed on the shadowed thicket. His off-white shawl fluttered slightly, though there was no wind. Her pulse quickened when their eyes met. Even briefly, the grin lingered in her mind. It was wide, unnatural, like the smile of an ancient being who had seen centuries pass and found amusement in mortal fear. Sarah shivered, realizing that the eyes, though human in shape, carried the weight of something beyond comprehension. By the time she reached her college, the spell of dread remained clinging to her like an invisible cloak. She tried to immerse herself in her classes, but the image of the Watcher lingered in the corners of her vision. The thought of him standing there for hours, unmoving, guarding some secret hidden in the thicket, gnawed at her mind. Returning home at 3 p.m., the fog had thickened further, curling around the streets like dark, whispering serpents. The man remained, the same posture, the same grin. His presence was no longer just a figure on the road. It was a sentinel, a wraith tethered to the land, perhaps summoned by some unseen invocation. Even the three-wheeler driver seemed unaware of the supernatural tension, his face a mask of mundane concern. Sarah, however, could feel it, the silent pulse of an ancient watchfulness, the gaze that penetrated the veil of the living world, fixated on what lay hidden among the trees. That evening, Sarah returned home, exhausted and tense, but the dread was far from over. As night settled, thick and suffocating, the Watcher remained. Her father arrived, noting the strange figure silently standing since dawn. His presence unnerved even him, a man who rarely showed fear. But tonight, the air itself seemed heavy with the whispers of unseen jinn. Before confronting him, her father approached cautiously. "Why have you stood here all day?" he asked, his voice firm yet trembling. The figure responded not with words, but with the same unsettling grin, the shadow of a sinister patience lurking in those eyes. It was as if the man drew strength from the darkness, feeding on the unspoken terror that clung to the house like a curse. After dinner, a strange insistence gripped her father. He instructed everyone to lock doors and windows, a ritual of protection against more than just ordinary intruders. Even as Sarah obeyed, she felt the Watcher's gaze piercing the walls, undeterred, patient, eternal. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house sounded like whispered invocation, every flicker of light a warning. Sarah lay in bed, imagining the figure beyond the glass, unmoving, an ancient presence defying human time. It was no mere man, it was an embodiment of vigil, a shadowy jinn that observed and waited, cloaked in fog and grinning with the secret of the unseen. Morning came, fragile and pale. The fog had lifted. The Watcher was gone, but his grin, the unnatural width of his eyes, remained etched in Sarah's mind. The fear was no longer of the visible, but of the invisible, of what might return and what might always be watching, just beyond the veil. Days passed, but the Watcher's presence lingered like a whispered curse. The air seemed heavier, shadows darker, and Sarah could not rid herself of the sense that something beyond the veil was still observing. Every gust of wind through the winter trees sounded like distant, sinister laughter, an echo of that eternal grin. One evening, Sarah and her mother ventured out to Kohl's for new clothes. The world seemed ordinary at first, the hum of shoppers and fluorescent lights masking the memory of the road and the figure. But then, across the aisles, a woman appeared, clad entirely in black, hair cascading like a midnight river. Her eyes were unnaturally wide, black eyeliner streaked down her pale face. The same unsettling grin that had haunted Sarah in the fog now appeared on this figure. Panic clawed at her chest. Her mother's voice was a distant echo, scolding, but Sarah's mind was trapped in terror. The woman seemed to glide, her gaze tracking Sarah with preternatural precision, as if feeding on her fear. Sarah darted between clothing racks, heart hammering, the feeling of ancient malevolence pressing down like a jinn's hand. Finally, her mother's hand grabbed her shoulder. Relief washed through Sarah, but the knowledge remained. This darkness had not vanished. The wide eyes and sinister grin were imprinted on her soul, a reminder that the unseen, the cursed, and the ancient could lurk anywhere, waiting for a moment of. Even after leaving the store, the image of the woman haunted Sarah. Her mind replayed the grin, the blackened eyes, as if an unseen jinn had etched them into her very soul. Night fell, and though the streets seemed quiet, the memory of the watcher in the fog merged with the sinister apparition in coals, forming a web of dread that refused to release her. Sarah's family tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but she could feel the lingering presence in the air, in the shadows, and in the silence between words. The fear was not of flesh and blood, it was of something that transcended, something that watched silently, patiently, beyond the veil of human understanding. She never saw the man on the road again, nor the woman in the store, yet their grins, their eyes remained, a testament to the unseen watchers, the silent jinn who feed on fear and curiosity. Sarah had glimpsed their patience, their malice, and she knew the shadows were never empty. Somewhere, just beyond the fog, the watchers still waited. The house, the street, the fog, they were no longer merely familiar. They were a threshold to something older, something dark and eternal. And Sarah, though safe in body, carried a shadow in her mind, a reminder that some eyes never blink and some grins never fade. The next part of this story will fill your mind with terror. Where are you sitting? How scared are you? Don't forget to comment. New viewers, subscribe or follow now. In the stillness of a South African night, the clock struck 2:30 a.m., a time when the veil between the living and the unseen thinned. Zama slept beside her 9-year-old daughter, Coco, in their 2-bedroom apartment, unaware of the shadow already slipping through the darkness. The apartment was silent, bathed in the soft hum of night, yet something malevolent stirred beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Zama awoke with a chill crawling down her spine, a sensation of a presence reaching for the tablet lying beside her. At first, she assumed it was Coco, a small hand in the darkness, but the touch carried a weight that no child could muster. The air grew heavy, charged with the unseen force of a jinn, a predator, invisible yet palpably close. Her scream shattered the quiet, a defiance that made the intruder falter. A man, unknown, cloaked in shadows, froze with her gaze upon him. Apple devices glinted in his hands, a modern talisman for an age-old malice. Panic surged as Zama realized the intrusion was no accident. The shadows themselves had chosen this moment to converge, testing the boundaries of her vigilance. They struggled, bodies colliding, a chaotic dance under the indifferent eyes of sleeping Coco. The intruder, driven by a mix of desperation and dark cunning, was swift, but Zama's maternal instinct became a shield, a fierce protective spell against this corporeal, jinn-like menace. Finally, he was forced back, retreating toward the living room, his intent thwarted. The apartment, though dimly lit and ordinary to the untrained eye, had become a battleground between the human spirit and an encroaching darkness, a night marked by fear that would etch itself into memory forever. The man's retreat was not the end. Shadows clung to him, almost sentient as he skulked toward the living room, slipping through the cracks of the mundane world like a jinn summoned from an ancient curse. Zama's heart pounded, every beat echoing like a war drum against the silence. Coco remained eerily asleep, oblivious to the battle of wills unfolding mere feet away. Zama grabbed anything she could, pots, pans, utensils. The clang of metal against tile became a protective incantation, a barrier of sound against the intruder's malevolent intent. With every thrown object, the figure recoiled, human yet not human, as if the night itself was lending strength to her will. The air tasted metallic, thick with the essence of fear, the lingering presence of spirits and entities unseen but palpable. In his retreat, Zama noticed the audacity of the intruder. He had unlocked the front door from the inside, a calculated escape route, the cunning of a being who understood both the human and the unseen realms. The apartment, high above the ground, had seemed safe, an impenetrable sanctuary, but the balcony, the burglar guards, the unlocked window, they were all weak points, exploited by a predator who moved like a shadow, crossing into the world of the living. When he finally fled into the night, Zama could feel the weight of his gaze lingering, a dark imprint on the apartment. Her breaths came in short, ragged gasps, her hands trembling, yet a spark of defiance remained. She had survived the encounter, but the knowledge of how fragile safety could be against unseen forces settled into her bones like a curse. Even as she checked the doors and windows again, every creak of the building, every sigh of the wind felt like a whisper from the shadows, a warning that the world is never fully safe, and sometimes the jinn walk among us, cloaked in flesh.
The night did not end with his escape. The apartment felt alive with residual malice, the kind that lingers after a jinn has passed, unseen but palpably present. Zama sat in the dim glow of the moonlight, filtering through the curtains, her body still tense, listening to the faintest whisper of movement. Every shadow seemed to flicker with intent, as if the intruder had left a fragment of himself behind, a dark seed waiting to bloom. Her mind replayed the moment the man had reached for her daughter. The thought of Coco caught in the grasp of something unholy churned her stomach. In the silence, she could almost hear the faint hissing, the subtle chanting of a presence that was neither fully human nor fully spirit, something ancient that drew strength from fear. Later, when neighbors called to say they had heard commotion but stayed inside, Zama realized the world was blind to the shadows that prowl unseen. She had been the sole witness, the lone barrier between the darkness and her child. The apartment, a second-floor sanctuary, had been breached not by chance, but by intent, by a being that knew how to exploit human complacency. Even after the adrenaline faded, the unease remained. Every creak of the floors, every draft from the windows was a reminder that the intruder, or something far darker, might still linger nearby, watching, waiting, feeding on the terror of the living. Zama understood that her survival had been temporary, a reprieve granted by courage, not fate. And deep in the corners of her mind, she felt it, a presence, patient and silent, as if the shadows themselves had learned her name. The jinn of the night had brushed against her life, leaving marks unseen but impossible to forget.
In the days that followed, Zama could not shake the feeling of being watched. The apartment, once a place of safety, now pulsed with unseen eyes. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like whispers from the jinn, and the shadows in corners seemed to twist with purpose. Even the sunlight filtering through the blinds could not dispel the lingering darkness. She double-checked locks, inspected windows, and moved with the precision of someone who knows unseen forces are patient and cunning. The memory of the intruder, the lean, silent figure stepping through the bathroom window as if it were a portal, haunted her every thought. It was no ordinary thief. This was a shadow that had taken shape in human form, a being whose intent was carved from malice and guided by some ancient, unseen law. At night, Zama could feel the air thicken. The faintest movement of curtains, the subtle shift of the room's atmosphere made her heart race. Coco slept, blissfully unaware, but the sense of encroaching presence never left Zama. She had glimpsed the predator of the dark, and she knew it would not forget her vigilance. Even as neighbors tried to comfort her, assuring her it was over, Zama sensed the truth. The world was not safe, and the spirits, or jinn, that haunt human spaces are patient. They wait for mistakes, for windows left unlocked, for the complacency of mortals. That night, as she lay in bed, Zama whispered protective prayers, each syllable a fragile shield against the darkness that had brushed so close, a darkness that could return at any moment. 2 days later, news came that one of the thieves in the area had been found dead at dawn. Zama could not tell if it was the same man who had invaded their apartment, and in truth, she did not care. The incident had left an indelible mark, a dark echo in her soul that refused to fade. The shadows he had brought with him, the feeling of being watched, of invisible eyes following every movement, remained. The apartment felt empty, yet charged with an unseen presence, as if the jinn had left a warning behind. Mortals are fragile, and vigilance is the only shield. Zama had survived, but the encounter had reshaped her perception of safety. No longer could she assume that closed doors and locked windows were sufficient against the cunning of beings that move between realms, unseen yet palpably close. Even now, when she recalls the night, the memory is visceral. The feel of the intruder's weight, the metallic scent of fear, the sense that a malevolent intelligence watched her every move. The shadows are patient. They do not forgive. They do not forget. And though Zama and Coco moved to a new home, the experience remains. A silent scar, a whispered warning, an eternal reminder that some dark presences linger, waiting for the night when doors are left open and the veil grows thin once more.
Be cautious before hearing what comes next.
Where are you listening from? Are goosebumps running down your spine? Comment below. New here? Subscribe now.
It was a normal, cool evening when Zama and her mother ventured out, unaware that the world held hidden watchers with grins that defy reason. The streets were calm, mundane, yet beneath the surface the air thrummed with unseen eyes, and the veil between the ordinary and the occult trembled like a thin membrane. Inside Coles, the fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, and shadows twisted unnaturally along the aisles. Zama, bored with browsing, wandered off from her mother, her footsteps echoing in the silent spaces. That was when she saw her, a woman clad in black from head to toe, long hair cascading like ink in water, eyes unnaturally wide and rimmed with black that had run down her face. The woman's gaze locked onto Zama, unblinking, an unnatural smile spreading across her lips, a grin that spoke of ancient malice, of entities that thrive on fear and curiosity. The air thickened, heavy with the invisible weight of a jinn-like presence, a darkness that seemed to seep into Zama's very bones. Panic rose like a tide as Zama frantically searched for her mother. The aisles seemed to stretch infinitely, shadows lengthening and writhing with intent. She turned back to the woman, only to find her closer, her grin wider, her presence more oppressive. The very space around Zama felt cursed, charged with an unseen force feeding on her terror, a predator cloaked in human form but infused with an ancient occult energy. Instinct took over. Zama darted between racks, seeking refuge in the flimsiest barriers, the hum of fluorescent lights failing to mask the oppressive darkness. Every heartbeat was a drum of fear, every breath a whispered prayer, as she realized she had stumbled into a space where human perception collided with a supernatural intelligence, waiting, smiling, patient beyond reason.
The woman in black glided closer, her presence warping the ordinary reality around Zama. Every aisle seemed narrower, every shadow deeper, as if the fluorescent lights themselves were dimming under the weight of an unseen jinn. The smile on the woman's face was no longer just unnerving. It carried the essence of an ancient darkness, a grin that had survived centuries, feeding on fear and uncertainty. Zama's heart hammered, each beat echoing in the charged silence, while the air seemed to vibrate with an unholy cadence. She realized she had no phone, no weapon, only the fragile human instinct to survive. The darkness around the woman thickened, almost tangible, curling like black smoke around the edges of Zama's vision. Then a hand gripped her shoulder. She spun around, her scream trapped in her throat, only to see her mother's face, a mixture of relief and sternness. But even in the safety of proximity, Zama could feel it, the oppressive presence of the woman, the jinn-like shadow that lingered, patient and waiting, feeding on the tremor of her fear. Her mother's voice cut through the thick air, asking the exact question Zama dreaded. Had she seen the woman? Confirmation left Zama's chest tight, but acknowledgement brought clarity. This was no random encounter. The dark figure had been watching, waiting for a moment to invoke terror, a being that existed in the liminal space between human perception and the supernatural. As they quickly left the store, the oppressive energy seemed to linger, following them like a shadow that could not be shaken. The grin, wide and knowing, remained etched in Zama's mind, a mark of the jinn's patience, a silent warning that some darkness never truly leaves. The night outside the store was deceptively calm, but Zama could feel the residue of the encounter clinging to the air, thick and almost sentient. Every shadow on the street seemed to stretch unnaturally, moving just beyond the corner of her vision. The grin of the woman in black haunted her thoughts, a lingering echo of something older than the city itself. Something that had walked unseen among mortals for centuries. At home, the apartment felt colder, darker, as if the encounter had left behind a trace of that malevolent presence. Every floorboard creak sounded like whispered laughter, and the faintest movement in the corner of her eye seemed deliberate, watching, evaluating. Zama realized the terror was not only in the woman, but in the unseen force she carried, the jinn-like essence that had crossed into the human realm, patient and calculating. Even mundane objects became sinister in the quiet of her room. The shadows of furniture seemed to twist and bend, as if stretching toward her. She sensed eyes in every reflection, grinning back at her. Sleep would not come. It was denied by the knowledge that the watcher, the darkness, could return at any time, uninvited, as patient as the night itself. Zama's mother noticed her daughter's agitation and tried to soothe her, but even parental comfort could not erase the chilling knowledge. The unseen world had brushed against them, and the shadows carried a memory now, one that would not easily release its grip. The smile, wide and knowing, had etched itself into their lives, a reminder that the ordinary is always threatened by forces ancient and patient, waiting in silence. The following days offered no relief. Zama could feel the lingering pulse of the woman's presence, as if a fragment of that jinn-like darkness had embedded itself into the air around her. Every corner of her home seemed to harbor invisible watchers, their unseen eyes tracking her movements. Even the sunlight that streamed through the windows could not purge the shadow. She replayed the encounter in her mind, the unnerving grin, the unnatural eyes, the sense of deliberate patience. This was no ordinary human. It was a vessel for something far older, a being that thrived on fear and hesitation, weaving dread into the very fabric of human spaces. Zama understood with a cold certainty that the world of the unseen had touched her life, and she had glimpsed only the surface of its patience. Every mundane noise, a creak, a sigh of wind, the shuffle of furniture, triggered a visceral sense of unease. The jinn-like presence seemed to hover just beyond perception, watching, waiting, invisible yet potent. Zama realized that this darkness did not obey human rules. It was patient, eternal, and utterly indifferent to the ordinary flow of time. The city itself, with its lights and people, felt like a fragile illusion, a thin veil separating mortals from the vast, ancient, and malevolent world of unseen watchers. Even in her mother's comforting presence, Zama felt the weight of the gaze, the grin, the knowledge that some shadows never truly vanish. They merely wait for the night to grow thin again. The store. Zama could still feel the weight of those wide, unnatural eyes, the sinister grin that had defied human reason. It was as if a fragment of that darkness had attached itself to her, a silent sentinel embedded in the corners of her perception. Even in the safety of home, she sensed the presence, patient and eternal. Shadows seemed to twitch with intent. Fleeting glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision whispered of a jinn-like intelligence, watching, learning, waiting. The grin had etched itself into her mind, a permanent scar of fear that no rational explanation could erase. Zama understood something profound and terrifying. The encounter had not ended. The darkness existed beyond time, beyond the ordinary senses of humans, and it had chosen to reveal a fragment of itself to her. The smile, wide and knowing, was a warning, a promise, a mark of beings that exist alongside the mundane world, but are neither bound nor visible until they choose to appear. Even now, the memory lingers like a shadow at the edge of perception. Zama knows the world is never entirely safe. Some darknesses do not leave, they endure. They wait, patient and eternal, and sometimes, in a fleeting moment of vulnerability, their grins appear, reminding mortals that the veil between the ordinary and the occult is perilously thin. The story will get scarier as it goes on. Where are you listening from? Is your heart pounding? Comment below. New viewers, subscribe now.